Hello, I'd like to introduce you to this short webinar conversation with Wayne Bruce, who's Director of Communications for Bentley Motors. This is part of our series around enabling and supporting leaders, managers and employees to return to work engaged and safe. And the reason that I've asked Wayne to join me on this conversation is I was particularly impressed. I've been working with Wayne for quite a while now and supporting his comms team. And I was particularly impressed with the way that Bentley Motors had approached bringing people back physically to the workplace, but also bringing people back emotionally to the workplace, both for those who were furloughed and for those who had remained working throughout the period of the main part of the pandemic. So I'm just going to ask Wayne a few questions and we'll have a conversation. So Wayne, thank you for joining us today. Could you tell us a little bit about the things that Bentley Motors have done to help people return to work in an engaged and safe way?
Sure, Ruth. Maybe let's go back to March the 20th. I remember it very well. That was the day that we shut down the factory. And we did it not because we had to. We could have continued to build cars. We had demand, we had parts. The reason we did it was to protect colleagues and protect their families. And that was done very quickly. Some 4,500 staff were either told to work from home, so that would be the office population, maybe nearly 2,000 people. The rest, mainly production people, were told to go home and sit at home and stay on till further notice on full pay. The government then brought in its furlough scheme. So first of all, there was communicating with people about what that meant, who would be on that, identifying what were the business critical processes that still needed to keep going. And at the same time, trying to mitigate the amount of money that was being spent literally on keeping the lights on here in Crewe, despite the fact we're not building cars. And just to quantify that for you, in our case, it's around 20 million euros every week. We sort of settled down to a way of working for a period of time. And then it became clear that we needed to start building cars again. And indeed we could. I guess by that stage, many people, certainly production staff, will have been at home for 8 weeks, watching their hair grow, not doing much else, I guess. There was still, let's say, a general sense of fear across the UK, both with the disease and people feeling safe, leaving their homes. So the biggest worry we had was that if we got a date when we would start production again, that nobody would come back. We'd already established a way of communicating with staff, bearing in mind that some were furloughed, some were working from home with a laptop. And we established a kind of drumbeat of weekly communications. We launched an employee app within a week, so that those who don't have work laptop, don't have a work phone, could download it to their own personal phone, so we could keep in touch with them. We were recording regular videos from the CEO, even from his home, just keeping the contact going. So we had a pretty good idea of what the mood was out there, and we could have just done another video, could have done another bulletin as we've been doing before, but myself and my colleagues in internal comms felt very strongly that we had to do something different. Firstly, and I think you said this, Ruth, actually, to show that we'd thought about it, because it's people's safety that we're dealing with here. And also to communicate that life was going to be different, because it was. So we didn't go to an external consultant for this. The team on site, while people were away, had worked on a program of changes across site around social distancing, around hygiene. Bear in mind also that you said you watched a documentary about building a Bentley. Well, that was all filmed before what we know now. And for the majority of processes, you need to be sometimes less than 1 meter apart in order to build the car. So fundamentally, the whole production system had to be changed. I guess we're lucky in that we build Bentleys, which are 2 meters wide and not something smaller, but still, the whole production line had to be changed, and each individual process had to be remapped to maintain the 2 meter social distancing, which was somewhat frustrating for the team because they just spent the last year and a half again trying to increase the efficiency of production and reducing the time it takes to build a car by 24%, rip it all up, start all over again. And it was recording our CEO, Mr. Adrian Hallmark. He said something in one of those speeches, which was about everyone coming back stronger. And that just kind of stuck in my head. And I thought, you know, when you're driving on something just seems right. Come back stronger just sounded great because it was literally come back and it was stronger. Something very easy to understand. It wasn't an acronym. It was a kind of call to action that everyone could get behind. So we also realised that it's not just the colleague we have to convince it's safe to come back. It's their family. So it kind of went against the grain for me to produce something printed, but to get to people's families at home, we needed to physically post them something so that it would arrive on the doormat and they could show their loved ones, they could show their family. So we produced a Come Back Stronger booklet in a very different look and feel to what Bentley's normally done, just detailing some of the changes that we're making and what was going to happen when colleagues came back to site. This was backed up by a video, and symbolically I made sure that the CEO was actually back on site to record it. So if Adrian's come back, then it must be safe for me to come back too. And we did a kind of cascade of these things, plus some more operational instructions in the Friday before the Wednesday that production staff were due to come back on site. And on that very first Wednesday, we had 1,500 people due back, and we had the board members out in the car park. We had the Come Back Stronger banners everywhere. The board members, they're welcoming people back, and everyone was nervous as to how many people would come in. And I remember very well that 2 people out of that number failed to come in. One had set their alarm incorrectly, and the other had a minor car accident. So on that basis, I think it was success.